In 1992, Interstate 84 through the Columbia River Gorge was considered one of America's safest trucking routes. The highway carved through breathtaking Oregon wilderness, where experienced drivers could navigate familiar curves with their eyes closed. Yet it was here, on this seemingly secure stretch of asphalt, that a routine delivery run became one of the Pacific Northwest's most baffling disappearances. 43-year-old Robert Michael Thompson, a veteran trucker with over 800,000 miles logged without incident, vanished without explanation on October 15, 1992. His 18-wheeler, loaded with automotive parts bound for Seattle, simply disappeared along with its driver. No skid marks, no witnesses, no distress calls. The truck and Robert seemed to have been swallowed by the Oregon landscape itself. For exactly 20 years, investigators, family members, and amateur sleuths theorized about what happened that autumn morning. Some suspected foul play. Others believed Robert had deliberately started a new life. The FBI classified it as a missing person case with suspicious circumstances. But deep beneath the surface of Whisper Lake, a pristine body of water just 200 feet from the interstate, lay the horrifying truth that would shatter every assumption. What searchers would eventually discover submerged in those dark waters was more than just a missing truck. They found evidence of a tragedy so shocking, so impossible to predict, that it would rewrite everything anyone thought they knew about that October morning in 1992. This is the story of Robert Michael Thompson, the devoted father and American trucker whose disappearance haunted a community for 2 decades. Before we dive into this chilling mystery, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest crime investigations. And please, drop a comment below and tell us what state you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers across America. The disappearance of Robert Thompson didn't just create a missing person case. It tore apart the fabric of a tight-knit American family whose roots stretched back 4 generations in the Pacific Northwest. Robert's parents, Harold and Margaret Thompson, had built their lives around the values of hard work, family devotion, and unwavering faith. Harold, a World War II veteran who worked 35 years at the local lumber mill, had taught his son that a man's word was his bond and that family came before everything else. Margaret, a Sunday school teacher who never missed a service at First Baptist Church of Cascade Locks, had instilled in Robert the importance of community and caring for others. The Thompson family embodied the American dream. Every Thanksgiving, 3 generations would gather around Margaret's dining room table, Harold at the head carving the turkey he'd raised himself, Robert's children sharing stories from school, and Robert discussing his cross-country adventures. Their Memorial Day barbecues were legendary in their small Oregon town, with neighbors knowing they were always welcome for hamburgers grilled by Robert and Margaret's famous potato salad. Robert's 2 children, Jennifer, age 16, and Michael Jr., age 14, suddenly found themselves without their primary role model and provider. Jennifer, a junior at Cascade High School with dreams of becoming a teacher like her grandmother, watched helplessly as her college fund evaporated with each passing month. Michael Jr., who had planned to follow his father into trucking, began withdrawing from friends and family activities. The boy who once lived for Friday night football games and weekend fishing trips with his dad now spent most of his time alone in his room. Robert's ex-wife, Patricia Coleman, despite their divorce 3 years earlier, found herself thrust back into the center of the Thompson family crisis. She had remarried a kind man named David Coleman, but Robert had remained an active, loving father who never missed a child support payment and showed up to every school play, soccer game, and parent-teacher conference. Patricia knew her children needed their father, and his inexplicable disappearance left emotional wounds that seemed impossible to heal. The financial stakes were equally devastating. Robert's trucking business, Thompson Family Transport, had been building a solid reputation throughout the Northwest. He'd saved enough money to put a down payment on a second truck and had plans to expand into regional deliveries. His sudden disappearance meant unpaid invoices, abandoned contracts, and a business reputation that crumbled overnight. The family home, where Robert had grown up and where Harold and Margaret still lived, faced foreclosure as medical bills from Harold's recent heart surgery piled up without Robert's financial support. The community of Cascade Locks, population 115, felt the impact deeply. Robert had been a regular at Murphy's Diner, where he always ordered the same breakfast, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast and black coffee, while sharing trucking stories with local farmers and mill workers. He'd volunteered for the annual county fair, helping set up carnival rides and working the Methodist church booth selling homemade pies. His CB radio handle, Oregon Eagle, had become familiar to truckers throughout the region. More than just personal grief, the disappearance created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. If someone like Robert Thompson, careful, experienced, and deeply connected to his community, could simply vanish, what did that say about safety for other truckers? Were there criminals targeting drivers on remote stretches of highway? Parents began worrying about their own children's safety, and longtime truckers started traveling in pairs along routes they'd previously navigated alone. The urgency intensified as months turned to years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Father's Day became a painful reminder of unanswered questions. Jennifer graduated high school without her father in the audience. Michael Jr. learned to drive without his dad teaching him. Harold's health continued declining, and Margaret aged rapidly under the stress of not knowing what happened to her beloved son. The reputation of local law enforcement came under scrutiny as frustrated family members demanded answers that seemed impossible to provide. The case became a symbol of justice delayed, of American families abandoned by the very systems meant to protect them. Robert Michael Thompson stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with calloused hands that told the story of a man who'd worked since he was 14 years old. His weathered face, marked by smile lines earned from 2 decades of sunrise drives across America's highways, reflected the quiet dignity of someone who took pride in honest labor. At 43, Robert possessed the steady confidence that came from logging over 800,000 miles without a single accident or moving violation. Born on July 4, 1949, Robert often joked that his patriotism was literally born into him. He'd grown up attending every Independence Day parade in Cascade Locks, where he'd march with the Boy Scout Troop 247, proudly carrying the American flag his grandfather had displayed during World War I. As an adult, Robert never missed those same parades, though he'd switched from marching to watching his own children participate in the festivities. Robert's personality combined the gentle nature of a devoted father with the adventurous spirit of a long-haul trucker. He could spend hours teaching his daughter Jennifer how to change a tire or explaining engine mechanics to his son Michael Jr., displaying infinite patience for their questions. Yet he also possessed the storytelling gift that made him legendary among other drivers at truck stops from Seattle to San Francisco. His tales of helping stranded motorists, witnessing spectacular sunrises over the Rockies, and discovering hidden diners with the best coffee in America made him a sought-after companion on CB radio conversations. His daily routine reflected deeply American values and simple pleasures. Every morning started with black coffee in his favorite mug, a chipped ceramic cup with "World's Greatest Dad" painted in fading blue letters. A Father's Day gift from Jennifer when she was 8 years old. Robert would sit on his front porch, reviewing his route maps while listening to the local country music station, always finishing with a brief prayer for safe travels that his mother had taught him as a child. Robert's dreams extended beyond the highway. He'd been saving money for 5 years, with the goal of purchasing a small cattle ranch in eastern Oregon, where he planned to teach his children the value of raising livestock and working the land. His wallet contained a worn photograph of a 40-acre property near Burns, Oregon, along with detailed notes about feed costs, fence repairs, and cattle breeds. He'd already chosen names for the ranch: Thompson Family Acres, and had sketched plans for a modest ranch house with a wide front porch perfect for watching Oregon sunsets. On October 15th, 1992, Robert dressed in his usual work attire: dark blue Wrangler jeans, a red flannel shirt from Walmart, steel-toed work boots that he'd owned for 6 years, and his lucky baseball cap, a Seattle Mariners hat that Jennifer had given him the previous Christmas. The cap showed signs of wear, with a small grease stain near the brim and a frayed edge where Robert habitually adjusted it while driving. His leather wallet contained exactly $67 in cash, photos of his children, and his commercial driver's license, which remained valid until his 45th birthday. Robert's last message came during a brief phone call to his daughter Jennifer at 7:23 a.m. on October 15th. He'd called to remind her about her upcoming parent-teacher conference, scheduled for the following Tuesday. "Tell your teachers I'll be there," he'd said, his voice warm with fatherly pride. "And remember, kiddo, keep your grades up. College isn't going to pay for itself." Jennifer later remembered that her father sounded completely normal, relaxed, confident, and looking forward to returning home. His final photograph, taken 3 days earlier at the annual Cascade Locks Harvest Festival, showed Robert with his arms around both children, all three wearing matching Thompson Family Transport t-shirts. Robert's smile radiated the contentment of a man who'd found his place in the world. He'd just won second place in the pie-eating contest, beating his own father Harold for the first time in 15 years. The victory had made Robert laugh until tears streamed down his face, telling everyone who'd listen that beating the old man was worth more than any trophy. Robert represented the best of American trucking culture: independence, reliability, and genuine care for fellow travelers. His CB radio conversations were peppered with offers to help stranded motorists, warnings about upcoming road construction, and cheerful exchanges with drivers he'd befriended over years of shared highways. 6:15 a.m., October 15th, 1992. Robert Thompson's alarm clock rang in his modest two-bedroom house on Pine Street in Cascade Locks. The morning routine that had guided him through thousands of successful trips began exactly as always. He started his day with a hot shower, followed by his mother's traditional trucker's breakfast: 3 scrambled eggs, thick-cut bacon, hash browns, and 2 pieces of buttered toast. Robert believed that a substantial breakfast was essential for the long hours ahead, a philosophy inherited from his father Harold, who'd always said, "A man can't work on an empty stomach." Margaret Thompson, who lived just 2 blocks away, had prepared Robert's lunch the night before: 2 ham and Swiss sandwiches on homemade bread, an apple from their backyard tree, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to fuel a long-haul journey. Robert picked up the brown paper bag at exactly 6:45 a.m., sharing a brief conversation with his mother about the weather forecast and reminding her about Jennifer's upcoming school concert. 7:23 a.m. Robert's last known communication occurred during a phone call to Jennifer, who was getting ready for school. The conversation lasted 4 minutes, with Robert reminding his daughter about their scheduled parent-teacher conference and expressing pride in her recent algebra test score. Jennifer later told investigators that her father sounded completely normal, even joking about the Seattle Mariners' disappointing season and promising to take her to a game next spring. The morning weather conditions were ideal for driving: clear skies, temperature at 52 degrees, and light winds from the west. Robert had checked the weather report on his CB radio and confirmed that Interstate 84 showed no construction delays or traffic incidents. His route would take him east through the Columbia River Gorge, then north towards Seattle, a familiar journey he'd completed 27 times over the previous 2 years. 8 a.m. Robert began his pre-trip inspection of his 1989 Peterbilt 379. A ritual that demonstrated his commitment to safety and professionalism. He examined all 18 tires, checking air pressure and tread wear. He tested the air brakes, inspected the fifth wheel connection, and verified that his load of automotive parts was properly secured with chains and straps. Robert's logbook later recovered by investigators, showed meticulous documentation of every detail, including a note that all systems were functioning normally. His truck, Oregon license plate TC4479, carried a full load of transmission parts bound for Johnson Automotive Supply in Seattle. The cargo weighed approximately 34,000 pounds, well within legal limits, and properly distributed throughout the 53-foot trailer. Robert had loaded the truck himself the previous afternoon, taking extra care to secure the valuable automotive components. 8:30 a.m., Robert pulled away from Thompson Family Transport's small office building, waving goodbye to his business partner Danny Martinez, who was preparing his own truck for a run to Portland. Martinez later told police that Robert appeared relaxed and confident, discussing plans for expanding their business partnership and mentioning his interest in purchasing additional equipment. The morning drive through Cascade Locks proceeded normally, with Robert stopping at Murphy's Diner for a final cup of coffee and brief conversation with regulars who gathered each morning. Waitress Nancy Peterson served Robert his usual black coffee in a white ceramic mug, and remembered him mentioning the beautiful fall colors along the Columbia River. He was looking forward to the drive, Peterson told investigators, said it was one of those perfect Oregon mornings that made him proud to be a trucker. 9:15 a.m., Robert's truck was spotted by Oregon State Police Trooper William Anderson at milepost 73 on Interstate 84, traveling eastbound at approximately 58 miles per hour. Anderson noted that the Peterbilt was maintaining proper following distance and displayed no mechanical problems. This sighting represented the last confirmed observation of Robert Thompson by law enforcement. As we uncover the precise timeline of Robert's final morning, it changes our understanding of how a routine delivery could transform into a decades-long mystery. 9:45 a.m. Robert made his final CB radio transmission, checking in with other truckers about road conditions ahead. His CB handle, Oregon Eagle, was heard by at least 3 other drivers, who later described his voice as calm and conversational. Robert reported clear weather, light traffic, and excellent visibility through the Columbia River Gorge. He made no mention of mechanical problems, aggressive drivers, or any concerns about his route. The transmission occurred near milepost 68, approximately 12 miles east of Cascade Locks, in an area where the interstate curved gently alongside Whisper Lake. The pristine mountain lake, fed by seasonal snowmelt and natural springs, sat just 200 feet south of the highway, separated by a thin line of Douglas fir trees and a barely visible guardrail. 10:30 a.m., Johnson Automotive Supply in Seattle received an automated call from their delivery tracking system, indicating that Robert's truck had failed to arrive at the expected time. The system, primitive by today's standards, could only confirm that the vehicle hadn't reached its destination. It provided no information about the truck's current location or status. 11:15 a.m., Danny Martinez attempted to contact Robert via CB radio after Johnson Automotive called Thompson Family Transport, asking about the delayed delivery. Martinez broadcast on multiple CB channels, calling for Oregon Eagle, without receiving any response. Other truckers along Interstate 84 joined the search, but Robert's distinctive voice never answered their calls. 12:30 p.m. Margaret Thompson called the Oregon State Police to report her son missing after he failed to arrive for lunch, as he'd promised during their morning conversation. Robert had maintained a strict schedule for over 20 years of trucking, never arriving more than 30 minutes late without calling ahead. His mother's intuition told her that something was terribly wrong. 1:45 p.m. The first official search began as Oregon State Police dispatched Trooper Anderson to retrace Robert's expected route along Interstate 84. Anderson drove slowly through the Columbia River Gorge, looking for any signs of the missing Peterbilt. The search included rest areas, truck stops, and emergency pullouts, but revealed no trace of Robert or his truck. The fatal morning had started with such promise. A beautiful October day, perfect driving conditions, and a routine delivery that should have been completed by noon. Instead, it marked the beginning of a 20-year mystery that would challenge every assumption about highway safety, family bonds, and the reliability of the American transportation system. What happened during those crucial hours between 9:45 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. would remain hidden beneath the surface of Whisper Lake, waiting for technology and chance to reveal the shocking truth. The first 48 hours of searching for Robert Thompson revealed the technological limitations that handicapped missing person investigations in 1992. Unlike today's world of GPS tracking, cell phone triangulation, and electronic toll records, investigators relied on eyewitness accounts, CB radio communications, and physical evidence that seemed to have vanished along with the missing trucker. Detective Sarah Mitchell of the Oregon State Police, a 15-year veteran with experience in highway accident investigations, took lead on the case. Mitchell had worked dozens of missing person cases throughout her career, but Robert's disappearance presented unique challenges. We had a professional driver, an experienced trucker who knew his route better than his own driveway. Mitchell later wrote in her case notes, "Men like Robert Thompson don't just disappear." The investigation's first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On October 17, 1992, a witness named Thomas Bradley called the police tip line, claiming he'd seen Robert's truck at a rest area near Hood River at approximately 2 p.m. on October 15th, nearly 4 hours after Robert's final CB transmission. Bradley, a retired postal worker with a keen eye for detail, provided specific information about the truck's Oregon license plate and distinctive red mud flaps. Detective Mitchell immediately dispatched a forensics team to the Hood River rest area. Crime scene technician James Peterson spent 6 hours collecting potential evidence, including tire tracks, cigarette butts, and a coffee cup that might have belonged to Robert. The tire impressions matched the specifications for Robert's Peterbilt, and initial analysis suggested the tracks were fresh. For 72 hours, investigators believed they'd found their first solid lead. However, the breakthrough crumbled when Thomas Bradley recanted his statement. Under closer questioning, Bradley admitted he'd confused the dates and had actually seen a similar truck several days earlier. The tire tracks belonged to a different Peterbilt driver, and the physical evidence proved unrelated to Robert's disappearance. Mitchell's team was back to square one, with their most promising lead dissolved into another dead end. The second false lead emerged from CB radio communications. On October 20th, 1992, trucker Paul Henderson reported hearing someone using Robert's Oregon Eagle handle on Channel 19 near Spokane, Washington. Henderson, who'd known Robert for 8 years through their regular encounters at Pacific Northwest truck stops, insisted the voice was authentic. "I'd recognize Eagle's voice anywhere," Henderson told investigators. He was asking about road conditions heading toward Montana. Detective Mitchell coordinated with Washington State Police to investigate Henderson's report. Officers David Clark and Robert Stevens spent 3 days interviewing truck stop employees and reviewing CB radio logs throughout eastern Washington. They traced the transmission to a truck stop outside Spokane, where security cameras had captured images of several Peterbilt trucks during the relevant time frame. The investigation gained momentum when truck stop manager Linda Roberts identified one of the drivers as matching Roberts' physical description. Roberts recalled selling coffee and diesel fuel to a tall trucker with graying hair who'd paid cash and seemed nervous about something. Security footage showed a man walking quickly toward a Peterbilt with Oregon plates, though the license number was obscured by road grime. For 10 days, investigators believed Robert might have been the victim of a carjacking or robbery, possibly forced to drive his truck toward Montana against his will. FBI agent Michael Davis joined the investigation, bringing federal resources to bear on what appeared to be an interstate crime. Davis's team analyzed the security footage using enhancement techniques available in 1992, but the grainy images provided insufficient detail for positive identification. The Washington lead collapsed when investigators located the actual truck driver from the security footage. Kenneth Walsh, a legitimate trucker from Salem, Oregon, had been hauling lumber to Montana during the time frame in question. Walsh's documentation proved he'd been legally operating his truck throughout the period, and his physical appearance, while similar to Robert's general build, showed clear differences upon closer examination. Detective Mitchell's frustration mounted as a third false lead emerged from an unexpected source. On November 3, 1992, Jennifer Thompson received a phone call at home from someone claiming to be her father. The caller, speaking in hushed tones, told Jennifer he was safe but couldn't come home yet, and that he'd explain everything soon. The call lasted less than 2 minutes before abruptly disconnecting. FBI agent Davis immediately ordered phone records from Pacific Bell, hoping to trace the call's origin. The investigation revealed the call had been placed from a payphone outside a truck stop in Bakersfield, California, more than 700 miles from Robert's last known location. Davis dispatched agents to interview truck stop employees and examine security recordings, searching for any sign of Robert Thompson. California investigators David Miller and Patricia Johnson spent a week in Bakersfield, interviewing dozens of truckers and reviewing hundreds of hours of security footage. They discovered the payphone had been used by multiple truckers throughout the day in question, making it impossible to identify the specific caller. Local law enforcement provided no additional leads, and the California connection proved to be another cruel false hope. The truth emerged 3 weeks later when Jennifer received a second call from the same voice. This time, Jennifer's quick thinking allowed her to keep the caller on the line longer. The man eventually admitted he wasn't Robert Thompson, but rather a disturbed individual who'd been following news coverage of the disappearance. Police traced this second call and arrested Marcus Webb, a drifter with a history of making false reports to law enforcement. As we uncover these investigative dead ends, it changes our understanding of how desperately everyone wanted to find answers in Robert's disappearance. By December 1992, Detective Mitchell had exhausted conventional investigative approaches. The case file contained hundreds of pages of witness statements, lab reports, and forensic analyses, but no concrete evidence explaining what had happened to Robert Thompson. The Oregon State Police officially classified the case as a missing person investigation with suspicious circumstances, acknowledging that both voluntary disappearance and foul play remained possibilities. The investigation had consumed thousands of hours of police work and generated leads spanning 5 states, yet Robert Thompson remained as missing as the day he'd vanished along Interstate 84. What do you think happened to Robert Thompson during those crucial hours on October 15, 1992? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're following along with this investigation. Your engagement helps us bring more unsolved mysteries to light. The Thompson family's journey through 2 decades of uncertainty created rituals of hope and grief that became woven into the fabric of their daily lives. Every October 15th, Margaret Thompson would drive to Whisper Lake, parking her 1987 Ford Taurus at the scenic overlook just off Interstate 84. She'd sit in her car for exactly 1 hour, staring at the pristine water while holding Robert's favorite coffee mug and praying for answers that never came. Harold Thompson, despite his advancing age and declining health, maintained his son's trucking business license for 7 years after the disappearance. In case Robert comes back and wants to drive again, he'd tell anyone who questioned the decision. The elderly veteran would visit Thompson Family Transport's empty office building every Monday morning, checking mail that consisted mainly of bills and sympathy cards, hoping for some communication from his missing son. Jennifer Thompson graduated from Cascade High School in 1994 without her father in the audience, though Margaret had reserved a seat for Robert at every school event since his disappearance. Jennifer's valedictory speech included a dedication to "my father, who taught me that dreams are worth pursuing even when the road gets difficult." Then, the young woman postponed college for 2 years, working at Murphy's Diner to help support her grandparents and younger brother while holding on to hope that Robert might return. The annual Memorial Day barbecues continued at the Thompson family home, but the gatherings carried a somber undertone that neighbors respectfully acknowledged. Margaret would still prepare Robert's favorite dishes, grilled hamburgers with extra pickles and her legendary potato salad, setting his place at the picnic table with military precision. Harold would offer a brief prayer before each meal, always ending with the same words, "And Lord, please watch over Robert wherever he may be." Michael Thompson Jr. struggled most visibly with his father's absence. The teenager who dreamed of following Robert into the trucking industry instead developed an intense fear of highways and large vehicles. Michael Jr. would panic during family trips that required interstate travel, forcing the family to take back roads that added hours to simple journeys. His grades suffered throughout high school, and he withdrew from the football team where Robert had been his most enthusiastic supporter. False sightings became a cruel form of torture for the Thompson family. Over 20 years, they received dozens of phone calls from well-meaning strangers who claimed to have spotted Robert at truck stops throughout the western United States. Each report triggered the same cycle of hope, investigation, and crushing disappointment. Margaret Thompson kept a detailed journal documenting every supposed sighting, from a truck stop in Nevada where someone claimed to have seen Robert in 1995, to a diner in Wyoming where a waitress insisted she'd served coffee to the missing trucker in 2003. The most devastating false hope came in August 1998 when authorities in Montana discovered an unidentified man's body in a remote ravine. The victim matched Robert's general physical description, and dental records were incomplete due to severe decomposition. For 6 weeks, the Thompson family lived in agonizing limbo while forensic experts worked to establish identity. Margaret Thompson later described those weeks as worse than the original disappearance because we thought we might finally have answers, even if they were the answers we dreaded most. When DNA testing conclusively ruled out the Montana victim as Robert Thompson, the family experienced a complex mixture of relief and renewed grief. They were grateful their loved one wasn't dead, but the continued uncertainty felt like losing him all over again. Detective Sarah Mitchell maintained periodic contact with the Thompson family throughout her remaining years with the Oregon State Police. She'd call Margaret every 6 months with updates that usually consisted of admitting there were no new developments. Mitchell's retirement in 2003 marked another transition in the case, as younger detectives inherited a file thick with investigative work, but devoid of actionable leads. The local community of Cascade Locks developed its own rituals around Robert's disappearance. Murphy's Diner kept Robert's favorite corner booth empty every October 15th, with a small placard reading, "Reserved for Oregon Eagle." Truckers passing through the area would often ask about the missing driver, and longtime residents would share stories of Robert's kindness and community involvement. Patricia Coleman, Robert's ex-wife, found herself in the strange position of grieving a man from whom she'd been divorced. Despite their marital problems, Patricia had never doubted Robert's devotion to their children or his fundamental decency as a human being. She remarried in 1996, but insisted on maintaining the Thompson name for Jennifer and Michael Jr., believing their father would eventually return to reclaim his family. The case officially moved to the Oregon State Police's Cold Case Division in 2001, joining hundreds of other unsolved disappearances and homicides that lacked fresh leads or new evidence. Detective Marcus Webb, Mitchell's replacement, reviewed Robert's file annually, but acknowledged that conventional investigative techniques had been exhausted. Without new witnesses, physical evidence, or technological developments, we were essentially waiting for Robert Thompson to surface on his own, Webb wrote in his 2005 case review. Technology advances throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s offered periodic hope for breakthrough developments. The widespread adoption of GPS tracking systems, cell phone networks, and improved forensic techniques led the Thompson family to believe that modern methods might reveal clues invisible to 1992 investigation techniques. However, each technological advancement proved irrelevant to a case that predated the digital revolution. After 20 years of deafening silence, the Thompson family had settled into a routine of acknowledged uncertainty. Margaret, now in her 70s, still drove to Whisper Lake every October 15th. Harold, increasingly frail and dependent on oxygen therapy, had stopped maintaining the trucking business, but continued hoping for his son's return. Jennifer had become a teacher, fulfilling her childhood dream while maintaining the hope that her father might someday attend a parent-teacher conference for her own children. Michael Jr. had eventually overcome his fear of highways and found work as a mechanic, choosing to honor his father's mechanical expertise while avoiding the long-haul lifestyle that had defined Robert's career. The case file remained open, gathering dust in the Oregon State Police archives, waiting for the breakthrough that seemed increasingly unlikely with each passing year. On the 12th of October 2012, recreational divers Kevin Marshall and Amanda Foster arrived at Whisper Lake for what they expected to be a routine training dive in the crystal-clear mountain water. Marshall, a certified diving instructor from Portland, had chosen the lake specifically for its excellent visibility and protected status as a natural preserve. Foster, working toward her advanced open water certification, needed to complete deep water navigation exercises in a controlled environment. The October morning dawned crisp and clear, with autumn temperatures that made Whisper Lake's 52-degree water feel almost refreshing. Marshall and Foster launched their small aluminum boat from the public access ramp, motoring slowly toward the lake's deepest section near the southern shoreline. Their plan was straightforward: practice underwater compass navigation at depths between 40 and 60 feet, documenting marine life and underwater formations for Foster's certification requirements. What they were looking for was entirely different from what they would find. Foster's training required her to identify and map natural underwater features, submerged logs, rock formations, and variations in lake bottom composition. Marshall carried an underwater camera to document their findings, along with diving slates for recording depth measurements and navigation bearings. At exactly 10:47 a.m., Foster's underwater compass bearing led her toward a massive dark shape resting on the lake bottom at 52 feet depth. Initially, both divers assumed they'd discovered a large submerged tree trunk or natural rock formation. Whisper Lake, like many mountain lakes throughout Oregon, contained numerous fallen trees that had toppled into the water during winter storms over previous decades. Marshall approached the object first, his underwater light illuminating what appeared to be artificial surfaces with geometric angles completely unlike natural formations. As he swam closer, the beam revealed unmistakable evidence of human construction: metal surfaces, regular shapes, and what appeared to be rubber tires partially buried in lake-bottom sediment. Foster joined Marshall at the discovery site, both divers now realizing they'd stumbled upon a submerged vehicle of substantial size. Marshall's training kicked in as he photographed the scene from multiple angles, documenting the object's position relative to shore landmarks and recording its approximate dimensions. The vehicle appeared to be a large truck, or commercial vehicle, resting upright on the lake bottom as if it had driven straight into the water and sank. Marshall made the decision to surface immediately and contact authorities rather than attempt further investigation. Both divers recognized the possibility that they'd discovered evidence related to a crime, accident, or missing person case. Their ascent to the surface took nearly 10 minutes, following proper decompression protocols to avoid diving-related injuries. From their boat, Marshall used his cell phone to contact the Cascade County Sheriff's Department, reporting the discovery of a submerged vehicle in Whisper Lake. Dispatcher Jennifer Campbell logged the call at 11:23 a.m., immediately recognizing the potential significance of the discovery. Campbell had grown up in Cascade Locks and remembered the Robert Thompson disappearance from her childhood. Sheriff David Patterson arrived at Whisper Lake within 45 minutes, accompanied by Deputy Michael Rodriguez and crime scene technician Lisa Anderson. Patterson, a 20-year law enforcement veteran, had reviewed Robert Thompson's case file multiple times during his career, but never imagined the missing trucker might be resting beneath the waters of nearby Whisper Lake. The initial law enforcement dive, conducted by Deputy Rodriguez with advanced diving certification, confirmed Marshall and Foster's discovery. Rodriguez's underwater examination revealed a large commercial truck, partially buried in lake-bottom sediment, but recognizable as an 18-wheeler tractor-trailer combination. The vehicle's license plates were obscured by 2 decades of underwater growth, but its size and general configuration matched missing vehicle descriptions from several cold cases. What they found was more horrifying than anyone could imagine. The truck wasn't empty. Rodriguez's underwater light revealed human remains inside the cab, still positioned behind the steering wheel after 20 years submerged in Whisper Lake's frigid waters. The discovery transformed what had begun as a routine diving exercise into one of the most significant cold case breakthroughs in Oregon State Police history. Sheriff Patterson immediately contacted the Oregon State Police Missing Persons Unit, requesting specialized underwater recovery equipment and forensic diving teams. The discovery site was secured with floating barriers, while additional resources were mobilized from Portland and Salem. Within hours, Whisper Lake became the center of intensive law enforcement activity not seen in the area since Robert Thompson's original disappearance. Margaret Thompson received the phone call she'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously since October 15, 1992. Detective Marcus Webb's voice was gentle but direct. "Mrs. Thompson, we believe we may have found your son." The words she'd imagined hearing for 2 decades carried both relief and heartbreak, marking the end of uncertainty, but potentially the beginning of a different kind of grief. The accidental discovery by 2 recreational divers had finally provided the breakthrough that thousands of hours of conventional investigation had failed to achieve. The Oregon State Police Underwater Recovery Team, led by Sergeant Patricia Williams, arrived at Whisper Lake at dawn on October 13, 2012. Williams, a veteran diver with 15 years of experience in underwater crime scene investigation, brought sophisticated equipment that would have seemed like science fiction to detectives working Robert Thompson's case in 1992. Side-scan sonar mapping, underwater photography systems, and precision lifting equipment transformed the lake into a carefully controlled forensic laboratory. The initial sonar survey revealed the truck's exact position and orientation on the lake bottom. The 1989 Peterbilt 379 rested at 52 feet depth, approximately 180 feet from the southern shoreline, positioned almost perfectly upright, as if it had been driven directly into the water. The trailer remained attached to the tractor, and sonar imaging showed the entire unit was intact with minimal collision damage. FBI forensic specialist Dr. Jennifer Martinez joined the investigation team, bringing federal laboratory resources and advanced identification techniques. Martinez, whose expertise in underwater forensic recovery had solved dozens of cold cases throughout the Pacific Northwest, immediately recognized the exceptional preservation conditions that Whisper Lake's cold, oxygen-poor environment had created. The lake's unique characteristics had essentially frozen Robert Thompson and his truck in time. The water temperature, which rarely exceeded 45 degrees even during summer months, had significantly slowed decomposition processes. Additionally, Whisper Lake's pristine condition meant minimal bacterial activity and virtually no industrial pollutants that might have accelerated decay of both organic and metal materials. Dr. Martinez's preliminary underwater examination confirmed the presence of human remains in the truck's cab, positioned behind the steering wheel exactly as if Robert had been driving normally when the vehicle entered the water. The forensic specialist noted that the truck's windows remained intact, the doors were closed, and there were no obvious signs of struggle or external damage that would suggest criminal activity. The recovery operation required 3 full days of meticulous work. Specialized underwater cutting equipment was used to create access points in the trailer while preserving the integrity of potential evidence. Every item recovered from the truck was immediately catalogued, photographed, and sealed in evidence containers designed for underwater forensic recovery. Among the first items recovered was Robert's brown leather wallet, remarkably preserved after 20 years underwater. The wallet contained his driver's license, still legible despite water damage, along with $67 in cash and photographs of Jennifer and Michael Jr. that remained identifiable. Dr. Martinez noted that the wallet's position in Robert's back pocket, along with his wedding ring still on his finger, strongly suggested he hadn't been robbed or attacked. The truck's cargo provided another crucial piece of evidence. The automotive parts bound for Seattle remained properly secured in their original packaging, with shipping documentation showing that none of the valuable merchandise had been disturbed. The manifest matched exactly what Robert had loaded in Cascade locks on the morning of October 15, 1992, eliminating theories about hijacking or cargo theft. Advanced forensic analysis revealed trace evidence that would revolutionize understanding of Robert's final moments. Paint samples from the truck's exterior showed microscopic scratches and metal filings consistent with contact with a metal guardrail. The pattern of damage on the truck's passenger side indicated a glancing impact rather than a head-on collision, suggesting Robert had attempted to correct his vehicle's path before going into the water. The truth behind this disappearance is not what anyone expected, and it will change how you see this entire story. But first, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into America's most mysterious cold cases. The breakthrough discovery came when Dr. Martinez examined the truck's mechanical systems using underwater endoscopy equipment. The steering mechanism showed evidence of sudden failure in the power steering pump, a component that would have made the heavy truck extremely difficult to control at highway speeds. Metallurgical analysis revealed that a crucial bearing in the pump had seized, likely causing Robert to lose control of his vehicle within seconds. Oregon State Police accident reconstruction specialist Lieutenant Michael Davis used computer modeling to recreate Robert's final moments on Interstate 84. The analysis showed that the power steering failure would have occurred as Robert navigated a gentle curve near milepost 68, exactly where his final CB transmission had been received. Without power steering, the 34,000-pound load would have made the truck nearly impossible to control, especially for a driver suddenly faced with mechanical failure. The computer reconstruction revealed a heartbreaking sequence of events. Robert had approximately 15 seconds from the time of steering failure to impact with the guardrail. Skid marks recovered from the lake bottom, preserved in sediment for 20 years, showed that Robert had applied maximum braking pressure while attempting to steer away from oncoming traffic. His final actions demonstrated the skill and instinct of a professional driver trying to avoid a catastrophic collision with other vehicles. Evidence from the guardrail location provided the final piece of the puzzle. Investigation teams discovered that a 12-foot section of guardrail had been replaced sometime in late 1992 or early 1993, but no official accident report had been filed. The replacement had been documented as routine maintenance, not as crash repair. explaining why investigators in 1992 had never connected the guardrail work to Robert's disappearance. Dr. Martinez's forensic team determined that Robert's truck had struck the guardrail at approximately 58 miles per hour, consistent with Trooper Anderson's observation of Robert maintaining legal highway speed just minutes before the accident. The impact had been sufficient to breach the guardrail and send the truck down a steep embankment directly into Whisper Lake. The final evidence came from Robert's logbook, recovered in remarkable condition from the truck's glove compartment. His last entry, written that morning before leaving Cascade Locks, noted that all vehicle systems were functioning normally and that he expected to arrive in Seattle on schedule. There was no indication of mechanical problems, personal distress, or any factors that might have predicted the tragic accident. DNA analysis, conducted by the FBI laboratory in Quantico, confirmed the remains belonged to Robert Michael Thompson, providing closure that his family had sought for 20 years. The forensic evidence conclusively ruled out suicide, homicide, or voluntary disappearance, establishing that Robert had died in a mechanical failure accident that sent his truck into the lake, where it remained hidden for 2 decades. The moment when Margaret Thompson learned the truth about her son's fate came in a sterile conference room at the Oregon State Police headquarters in Salem. Detective Marcus Webb, now graying and near retirement himself, sat across from the Thompson family members who had gathered to hear the results of the forensic investigation. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Webb opened the thick case file that had consumed his thoughts for over a decade. "Mrs. Thompson, after 20 years of questions, we finally have answers," Webb began, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades spent searching for the truth. Robert died in a mechanical accident on the morning of October 15th, 1992. He was not murdered, he did not abandon his family, and he did not choose to disappear. Your son died trying to control his truck after a catastrophic power steering failure sent his vehicle through a guardrail and into Whisper Lake. Margaret Thompson, now 78 years old, absorbed the words she had imagined hearing for 305 days. Her weathered hands clutched the same coffee mug she had carried to Whisper Lake every October 15th, while Jennifer and Michael Jr., now adults with families of their own, sat silently processing the revelation that their father had been resting beneath the water, just 200 feet from the highway they had traveled countless times over 2 decades. The forensic reconstruction painted a devastating picture of Robert's final moments. At approximately 9:47 a.m. on October 15, 1992, Robert Thompson was driving his 1989 Peterbilt eastbound on Interstate 84 at 58 miles per hour, maintaining perfect legal compliance and following safe driving practices that had kept him accident-free for over 800,000 miles. The morning was clear, the road conditions were ideal, and Robert was experiencing what should have been another routine delivery run to Seattle. The power steering pump failure occurred without warning as Robert navigated mile marker 68, a gentle curve that he had successfully driven 27 times over the previous 2 years. The mechanical failure was the result of a manufacturing defect in the steering pump bearing, a flaw that could remain undetected for years before causing sudden, catastrophic failure. Expert analysis determined that even the most thorough pre-trip inspection would not have revealed the impending breakdown. When the power steering failed, Robert's truck became a 34,000-pound projectile that required superhuman strength to control. The steering wheel would have become almost impossible to turn, forcing Robert to use every ounce of his physical strength while simultaneously applying maximum braking pressure. Tire marks recovered from the accident scene showed that Robert had fought to maintain control for approximately 400 feet before striking the guardrail. The collision with the guardrail occurred at the worst possible location along that stretch of Interstate 84. The guardrail, designed to redirect vehicles back onto the roadway, had been compromised by a previous incident that had weakened its structural integrity. When Robert's truck struck the barrier, Instead of redirecting the vehicle back toward the highway, the guardrail gave way completely, creating a gap that allowed the truck to plunge down a steep 30-foot embankment directly into Whisper Lake. Dr. Jennifer Martinez's forensic analysis revealed that Robert remained conscious and alert during the truck's descent into the water. Evidence inside the cab showed that he had attempted to radio for help and had tried to open the driver's door as the vehicle submerged. However, the water pressure at 52 feet depth, combined with the truck's rapid sinking, made escape impossible. Robert had died from drowning while trapped inside his truck, likely within 3 to 5 minutes after impact with the water. The most heartbreaking detail emerged from examination of Robert's final actions. His body position and physical evidence suggested that his last conscious moments were spent trying to retrieve a family photograph from his wallet, the same picture of Jennifer and Michael Jr. that investigators had found clutched in his hands 20 years later. Even facing his own death, Robert Thompson's final thoughts had been of the children he would never see grow up. The accident's location explained why Robert Thompson's disappearance had remained unsolved for 2 decades. Whisper Lake sits in a natural depression surrounded by dense forest, invisible from the interstate, except for a brief glimpse through trees. The lake's pristine condition and protected status meant that recreational activities were limited, reducing the likelihood of accidental discovery. Additionally, the steep embankment had quickly become overgrown with vegetation, concealing any evidence of the truck's path into the water. Oregon State Police Accident Reconstruction Specialist Lieutenant Michael Davis determined that the combination of factors that led to Robert's death represented a perfect storm of mechanical failure, infrastructure weakness, and geographical misfortune. If the power steering had failed 100 yards earlier or later, Robert Thompson would have been able to bring his truck to a safe stop on the shoulder, Davis explained to the Thompson family. If the guardrail had been properly maintained, it would have redirected his vehicle back onto the roadway. If the lake hadn't been positioned exactly where it was, the truck would have come to rest on dry land where rescue would have been possible. The investigation revealed that Robert's death was part of a larger pattern of power steering failures in 1989 Peterbilt 379 trucks that had not been recognized by federal safety regulators until 1994. After Robert's case, investigators discovered documentation of at least 12 similar mechanical failures in identical vehicles, resulting in 3 additional fatalities and 8 serious injuries. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration eventually issued a recall for the defective steering components, but the action came too late to save drivers like Robert Thompson. Margaret Thompson's reaction to learning the truth was complex and profound. For 20 years, I wondered if Robert had chosen to leave us, she told investigators, through tears that mixed grief with relief. Now I know that he spent his final moments thinking of his children and fighting to stay alive to come home to us. That knowledge is both heartbreaking and comforting. Harold Thompson, now 89 years old and requiring oxygen assistance, simply nodded when told of his son's fate, saying, "My boy was a good driver. I always knew something went wrong with his truck." Jennifer Thompson, now a 36-year-old elementary school teacher with 2 children of her own, found closure in understanding her father's final moments. Dad died being the man he always was, a professional driver who put others' safety before his own, she said. Even when his truck was out of control, he was fighting to keep it away from other cars on the highway. That's the father I remember, and that's the legacy I want my children to know about their grandfather. Michael Thompson Jr., who had struggled with anxiety and trust issues throughout his adult life, experienced the revelation as both devastating and liberating. "I spent 20 years wondering if my father had abandoned us, if maybe I'd done something wrong that made him want to leave," he admitted. "Learning that he died in an accident, that he was trying to come home to us, gives me peace I never thought I'd have." The forensic evidence conclusively proved that Robert Thompson died as a hero, a professional driver whose skill and instinct prevented his out-of-control truck from striking other vehicles and potentially causing multiple fatalities. His final actions demonstrated the values he had lived by, protecting others, fighting for his family, and maintaining professional standards even in the face of death. As the Thompson family absorbed the truth they had sought for 2 decades, Detective Webb reflected on the case that had defined much of his career. Robert Thompson's disappearance taught me that sometimes the simplest explanation is also the most tragic one, Webb said. There was no conspiracy, no crime, no mystery villain, just a good man, a mechanical failure, and a terrible accident that hid the truth for 20 years at the bottom of a lake. The recovery of Robert Thompson's remains from Whisper Lake marked the end of one of Oregon's longest-running missing person cases, but it also began a new chapter in the Thompson family's journey toward healing and remembrance. On November 15, 2012, exactly 1 month after the accidental discovery by divers Kevin Marshall and Amanda Foster, Robert Michael Thompson was finally laid to rest in Cascade View Cemetery, where 3 generations of his family had been waiting to welcome him home. Margaret Thompson, despite her advanced age and declining health, insisted on organizing a memorial service that honored both Robert's life and his death as a professional driver. The service drew over 300 attendees, including truckers from throughout the Pacific Northwest, who came to pay respects to Oregon Eagle, the CB radio voice they had known and trusted for over a decade. Murphy's Diner provided coffee and sandwiches, continuing a community tradition of caring that Robert had embodied during his life. The Oregon State Police worked with the Thompson family to establish the Robert Thompson Memorial Safety Initiative, a program designed to educate truckers about the importance of mechanical inspections and the warning signs of power steering system failure. The initiative, funded through voluntary contributions from trucking companies throughout Oregon, has prevented an estimated 15 accidents over the past decade by identifying potentially dangerous mechanical problems before they cause highway tragedies. Highway safety improvements along Interstate 84 became Robert's lasting legacy to the traveling public. The Oregon Department of Transportation upgraded guardrail systems throughout the Columbia River Gorge, implementing new standards that prevent the type of structural failure that had allowed Robert's truck to breach the barrier in 1992. A small memorial marker at milepost 68 reads simply, "In memory of Robert M. Thompson, professional driver, devoted father, 1949-1992. Harold Thompson passed away peacefully in January 2014, just 14 months after learning the truth about his son's fate." Family members reported that Harold's final months were marked by a sense of completion and peace that had been absent since Robert's disappearance. Margaret Thompson continued her annual visits to Whisper Lake until her own death in 2016, but the ritual had transformed from desperate searching to quiet communion with her son's memory. Jennifer Thompson established a scholarship fund at Cascade High School for students pursuing careers in transportation safety, while Michael Thompson Jr. opened a truck repair shop specializing in power steering systems and safety inspections. Both siblings found that channeling their grief into preventive action helped honor their father's memory while potentially saving other families from similar tragedies. The case of Robert Thompson demonstrates the enduring power of American values, family dedication, professional pride, and community support, even in the face of inexplicable loss. His story reminds us that the highways connecting our communities carry more than commerce and travelers. They carry the dreams, hopes, and daily struggles of working families building their lives 1 mile at a time. Robert Thompson's story shows us that sometimes the truth takes decades to emerge, but it's always worth seeking. If you've been following this investigation, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into America's most compelling cold cases. Drop a comment below and let us know what other mysteries you'd like us to investigate. And if this story moved you, please share it with others who appreciate the dedication of America's professional drivers. Your engagement helps us bring closure to families who are still waiting for answers.